Hello, and welcome to what could possibly be one of the longest videos on this channel. I have been on a journey. I have now read 500 books since I restarted reading in 2020. A wonderful year all round, I'm sure you can all agree. I have been slowly making my way through and I've reached 500 books. That does include rereads, I will stress that. And I include rereads because that cements them as a favourite. We are here to go through essentially my favourite books I've read since I restarted reading. I think 500 is a great milestone to reach, to have an idea kind of oh my god, I literally forgot this word a second ago as well. I was talking to other people and forgot. A stopping point to explore what I've read, what I've loved. I really hope that people either can say whether they love these books as well, or recommend books based on what I say here. Because if you read anything and think, oh yeah, this book's exactly like this kind of vibe that you've mentioned, it would be great to have recommendations from this. Of course, I may have read some of them. This is only like I don't know how many, I think it's like 30, 40 books that are my favourites from everything I've read. If you look in the time thing, I'm going to split it. This is not from worst to best of everything. This is in no particular order, split into genres. So I'm going to start with fantasy because, as you can see, this is the wheelhouse we typically play in. I also have lit fic, sci-fi, classics, and a couple of non-fiction books. And we're just going to go through, explain them. So if you want to see a particular genre, if you only care about a particular genre, just hit it up in there and you don't have to waste your time looking around everything. These are specifically books. So like from each series, I've tried to pick the particular book from it. So when I mention the book, I'm going to try to not do any spoilers. I'm going to try to keep it vague and explain why you should read that series to get to that point in the first place. Otherwise, I think we're safe to go into it. As I said, please let me know thoughts on all of these, thoughts on recommendations. I'd really appreciate it. I'm going to take each book off at a time. Beginning in fantasy and beginning with the latest book I finished that is on this list, which is The Crippled God by Stephen Erikson. A testament to epic fantasy. Now, of course, to get to this point, you have to read all 9 books before it, and if you're a madman, you read the extended universe, which I do plan eventually. When I come back to this series in, say, 5 years and reread it, I do plan on doing a full Malazan universe read with all the Esselmon and other extraneous Erikson books. But for this purpose, there are a lot of Stephen Erikson books that could end up on this list. I think Memories of Ice could be up there. I think Dead House Gates. I think Toll the Hounds, definitely. I think Bone Hunters for a lot of people would be up there. And I would agree with every single one of them. I can understand the argument for every single one of them. Purely because I have finished this so recently, it's hard to... if it wasn't The Crippled God, I think my argument would lean to Toll the Hounds. I think Toll the Hound's thematic arc and the way it went, like the juxtaposition between the quiet moments and the massive world-altering events just worked incredibly well for me. However, it does have the downside of a particular thing that I won't mention here, but yeah, there is a downside to it. But I think Crippled God, as a kind of microcosm for everything that Erikson does so well, it's hard to overlook it. Because, firstly, this is the series ending. I cried multiple times during this book. There are stunning moments from things leading up from book 1. There are moments, it gives you the full evolution of this series. Characters from earlier, the way they are now, where they are, it is just, I could not believe that he nailed it. Like, it is one of those series that you're like, oh, I don't think anyone could do this, let alone one person. I don't think any single person could do it, and he did. And he did it while being himself, which is frustrating in some sense, because Dust of Dreams and Crippled God as one piece of work there is a frustrating element to it because you don't know where you're going, and because it's the end, you're like, what are we doing here? Like this, there's so many characters missing, there's so many things that I'd rather be focusing on, and then it leads you to a point of convergence for everything where you're like, I understand, you're a genius, I fucking hate you for doing this so well, I'm crying, how have you done this? And yeah, there are books that do themes incredibly, and Malazan has series spanning themes that are executed and resolved in this book. Relationships that are series spanning. You have no idea where they're leading to or whether we should have been invested. You have to give yourself to the process of there being 7 books or something for certain characters, 10 books to get to the culmination of why you should have cared about their relationship in the first place, even though you do. But to give a justification of the ending and where you arrive at. And the book nailed it. The writing continues to be just stunning. Has so much. I know a critique is that he's too philosophical. You lose a sense of the characters sometimes because they wax poetic about philosophy. I've personally never had a problem with that. And it's funny because part of the ending rationalizes why that's the case in a way that I had never thought about, and it's spellbinding. Like, that's really the case, is that everything about this I was just blown away by. I don't think Malazan's for everyone by any means. I can understand if you do not enjoy Malazan Book of the Fallen, but for me, it's one of the best. It's that and Realm of the Eldlings, which we'll see later, they're the GOATs. And the Crippled God is just, it's a miracle, honestly, to exist. We then move over to a recent release, which I absolutely love. There's a review on the channel, and that is Blood Over Brighthaven by Emma Wang. Really loved this one. This one kind of juxtaposes the Crippled God, where the Crippled God has a beauty of language, a beauty of writing that levels it up another section as well. For me, Emma Wang's plotting and character work is what really drew me into it, and the magic system. And also, this plays completely the opposite to... Malazan is a vague series in the sense of character motivations, what the author wants you to take away from it. It's very much down to the extrapolation. Whereas Emma Wang is telling you what she thinks and is doing it in a blunt fashion. Personally, I appreciate and love both when they're done well, and I think Blood Over Brighthaven is a great example of it. This boasts an actually morally grey protagonist, which a lot of series that boast morally grey characters, they don't quite have them. This is someone that you are compelled to read about in Siona and want them to do what they're doing, but they can only do it because of their flaws, and they are also they have horrible opinions whilst they're doing it. It is the pure definition of a messy main character, and I really like that, because typically the reason I think this book succeeds is because it has these kind of stereotypes or archetypes, some would measure them as two-dimensional, existing in certain places, and they exist for the nuance of our central characters to exist within. There's a really interesting idea that I know people in that comment section really lost their mind with the sense of like, if I can't relate to the evil men, if I can't relate to them, then why do I care about this book? In my opinion, gender is irrelevant. Gender is irrelevant in this book. Instead, it is prejudice in any form. And it comes down to the fact that there are these people who do things purely for the sole benefit of themselves, and they will cut down and remove anyone in their path, they will tread on anyone. That is the way it is. And then there are people who are victims of that. And in the middle, there are people like, I imagine, yourself and me. People who are complicit in some way. Our main character is meant to define that as someone who is able to do what is necessary and able to do what is needed to be done, but it's only able to do it because of their flaws and because of their prejudice in some ways. And it's about how you react to that, how you confront it. The character is very defensive in some ways. It plays that perfectly, where I was frustrated with her, I was angry at points, I also understood her at other points. There was just, I found the central character to be a fascinating and truly morally grey protagonist. So, yes, Blood Over Haven. It's hard to go into the plot too much because there is kind of a big twist that changes how you think the book's going to go. So I'm not even going to mention the plot because it's essentially a dark academia. So imagine, Siona is the first woman to be raised to high mage, and essentially it just progresses from there. I won't say any more than that because I think the book does it itself. Read the first chapter of Blood Over Brighthaven. I'm sure you can probably read like a sample chapter or something. And I think if you love that, you're going to love the book. If you push away from it, if you don't like it, then just don't read it. I think it's that simple. I think the first chapter is the litmus test for how you'll feel about the whole thing. The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez is up next. An absolutely phenomenal piece of work. This goes back to beautiful writing, ingenious experimentation with the form, a real harkening back to classic literature and myth, like a lot of mythology, incredibly layered and well done. This is a framed narrative. You are a character, so it is second person, so you are someone going to watch a play in, it's like a dream theatre, is it called? But essentially, you are an audience member going to watch this play. You're in a kind of faux 1940s, it's hard to say exactly, fantastical world. And the idea is that your heritage means that you have one dream where you go to this dreams theatre and you experience a story, and that story will inform or change your life in some way. And you are someone who goes to that and witnesses the story of Kima and what's the other name? Yun. Wonderfully written and, like I said, experimental story, which has like the Greek chorus where you're hearing other characters' thoughts, where you can imagine them turn to like towards the audience and speak their thoughts out. So you have this really interesting writing style that allows you to have as many opinions as the author can fit and as many perspectives while staying true to this center of you're watching these two particular characters in Kima and Yun, and then you're experiencing it as yourself. So there is layers to this story that you peel back. They're taking this goddess and trying to take her somewhere, and they are being assailed. They're being chased by the three terrors, which are it's the Emperor's three children, and they are creepy. They have creepy powers. They are really antagonistic. You are genuinely scared of them quite a lot of the time. There's freaky imagery. They're doing weird things, and they are truly terrors. Like they are terrifying in some sense. And yeah, this was a book that just opened up a new world of how people can approach writing fantasy, taking a risk, going with your gut, doing what you want, writing this phenomenally framed story, like being able to balance the multiple layers of frame narrative that you have and do it in such a compelling way that you're emotionally invested to all the characters. You are freaked out. It comes together incredibly well, and Spear Cuts Through Water, that's a winner in my opinion. That was a straight 5-star. Then we have The Lines of Al-Rasan by Guy Gavriel Kay. When I finished this book, I would not have expected this to be on this list. That is what I would say. And it's been probably half a year since I've read it now, and this book continues to live in my mind. I rated it, I think, 4.5 stars when I first read it. It's just growing. It just keeps staying there and festering. This is a book about three main characters that are from different races, different religions. Analogous to Christianity, Muslims, and Jewish people. And one of each of them are exiled from their homelands and end up being together. in this kind of band. And firstly, the political machinations are fantastic. The battles are really well done. There's a lot of great fighting, a lot of great character work. And that's really, this book shines in the sense that I didn't realize how invested I was in the characters until a certain moment. And I think a lot of people have this experience when they read it where, yeah, I was kind of like, oh, this is a good book. I get this. I like the characters. I understand. I feel like I get this. This is a solid book. And then there's a particular scene where suddenly I was like, oh my god, I really care what happened to these people. I need them to be okay. I need everything to turn out all right. I need these people to get along. And that is a thematic thing where this book is about how it essentially talks about how if people spend the time, and it's like forced proximity for ethnicities and religions, that if people are put together, they will find love and harmony between them on an individual level. They will find things to appreciate about each other. They'll find honor in other cultures. They'll find honor in other people. They'll find compassion. They'll find love. They'll find beauty. They'll find art. All of these things are there to be seen if you want to. And about how on a grand societal layer, those things disappear. And instead, hate and bigotry, ignorance will fester and grow, and these age-long battles are allowed to happen because people are kept apart. Yeah, the whole story is about this. And then suddenly I was reading one of the climactic scenes and I was just bawling my eyes out. It is a perfectly executed scene. Everyone who has read this book knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's a perfectly executed scene, seen through the perfect eyes to understand what's happening, completely compounds the microcosm of the story we are experiencing, nails the thematic landing, makes the characters your favourites, and just cements the book as a masterpiece, slow-paced masterpiece. So Lions of Al-Rassam is a book that has, now, whether I'm distance away from some problems I had, such as the sexual content in the book I thought was cringy, I think I've distanced myself enough away where now my mind is full of only the positives, which is why I will preface that saying that that does exist, and also saying that I didn't realise how much I loved the book until towards the end. So don't go into it and, like, if you start reading it and you're like, man, I don't get what this guy's talking about. Trust me, neither would I if I had watched this video before reading the book. So give it a chance. Words of Radiance. I don't think I need to say much. Words of Radiance is a perfect book in my opinion, apart from a couple of things. Naturally, it's not always going to be a perfect book before people come in there being like, well, you said you didn't like Lift that much. I understand. Words of Radiance is as close to a perfect fantasy book as you can get, in my opinion. It perfectly steps up from book one in the best way. Sanderson is unleashed where he doesn't have to keep explaining everything, he doesn't have to go over things. You get to explore the characters in such a different way. And Words of Radiance is really, in my mind, the second part to The Way of Kings. It resolves a lot of key plot points and thematics and character arcs that are set up in book one that don't have... the end of book one is kind of a half step to the full one that is Words of Radiance. Yeah, it introduces a level of nuance in terms of what the conflict is that we're following. It adds a level of nuance to all the characters. The writing is probably some of the best that Sanderson has done. It's still not my favourite by any means, but it doesn't hamper the experience. Instead, the characters get to shine. Hero moments. Now, the reason I read Sanderson is because of hero moments. That is his bread and butter. You know, he has these moments that just, they ascend. They pull you out of it. It feels like you're watching a blockbuster movie. And like, that is the true joy of his books, are when he nails those moments. So the arena scene bawled my eyes out the first time I read it. Just because I just felt it was perfectly set up and executed, and I realised how invested I was in everything going on. So this is prime Sanderson to me. I still think that the Stormlight Archive is worth reading purely for the experience of Words of Radiance. I know people disagree. I saw that a lot in the comments of my other video of why I'm no longer going to be reading Brandon Sanderson, but he was a formative experience for me, and that book still shines in my opinion. The Trouble with Peace, Joe Abercrombie. It wouldn't be a best of list if Abercrombie was absent. Before They Are Hanged could also be involved with this. If anything, Before They Are Hanged is probably the better choice to explain to you. So just know that those two are neck and neck for me. Trouble with Peace does take it, but in order to explain this to you, I'm going to talk about Before They Are Hanged because it comes earlier in the series. This is a special book. This was one of the first fantasy series I read after getting back into reading, and I enjoyed the Blade itself. But once again, Before They Are Hanged, it is a perfect satire on certain staples of fantasy literature. It plays with MacGuffins, it plays with Chosen Ones, it plays with the Wizards, it plays with everything that it touches. And this is the book that I think, like, there are certain series like Dresden Files where people say read 14 of these books and it will get good. I swear, bro. This is one where I do think reading the second book will define if you love Abercrombie or not. Everyone I've spoken to, usually they say the Blade itself's pretty good, you know, and then they put the book down, and then I have to grab them by the shoulders and be like, in 2 months, when you feel ready, read this book. You need to read the second one because it does. It completely. It just has Abercrombie at its finest. It has the greyness of the characters. It has the darkness of the world. It has the comedy. Absolutely razor sharp. It explores much beyond what we do in book one. Book one has very little plot. Book two definitely has more plot. It really explores a lot of the class divide. Yeah, it just explores corruption and darkness and hatred and all these things that we love in such a comedic way. I ate the book two up. It is one of my favourites, and a series that I really look forward to rereading. Red Seas Under Red Skies. How could it not be? This is my favourite out of the Gentleman Bastards. I know a lot of people love book one the most. Personally, book two is fantastic. This is an amazing piece, because the problem is that I'm basically repeating myself, that this is, it just steps up. But specifically, once again, the comedy in this, Pratchett is definitely an inspiration for Lynch. There are certain scenes in this book that get pure, almost farcical in humour that I loved. And there's a particular scene on a cliff face that I thought was the funniest shit I've ever read. It also has a great range of emotion, because our central characters are at a low point, 100%, and they are trapped in something and have to get out. So there's a real sense of stakes to the entire thing, because you know what situation they're in, you know how much this is, it's life or death. And as a result, everything in the book has stakes, no matter how it's played with. If it's played for humour, if it's played straight, everything has a level of stakes to it. So, yes, Scott Lynch is a genius. Also, we get on some ships in this. There are some, we explore new areas of the world. We get to explore with new characters. We have relationships developed that were fantastic. A heartbreaking moment in this book that had me very much emotional. It's the perfect all-rounded book, in my opinion, where it nails the emotional balance. It really hits you with heart and also sadness, which sums up the central characters. And it takes a lot to be able to balance that so well, where there is a bittersweetness and there's a bit of humour to everything. Sometimes people will make jokes that will make you sad. Sometimes there are sad things that will make you laugh. His understanding of the characters and what he wants them to be, once again, he just conveys them perfectly. Despite this coming all in one book, The Long Price Quartet, I will say specifically, I'll go with The Price of Spring, the last book. This is a defining series for me. One that I've reread and just completely adore. All of this there's 4 books in here. You know, that's less than Words of Radiance. So if you can find the Long Price Quartet, it's a rare old find. Grace and I were very lucky. If you're able to find it, 100% pick it up. It is worth it. And The Price of Spring, the reason that I think this is the best is because the central relationship of the characters that we have gone through for 4 books, and between each book there's a span of like a decade, so we've seen them from teenagers to older people, and we have their relationships with their children, we have the relationships between each other, and essentially it shows the path of 2 people's lives and how it can irrevocably change through things that are purposely done to them, things that are inadvertently done to them. It's a big nature versus nurture series, and it's hard to explain, but this has such a creative magic system that was truly gut punching and gut wrenching. And the end of book 3 and the consequences in book 4 it was shocking. It was absolutely shocking when it happened, and I think that he dealt with the consequences so perfectly, in such a like tragic and melancholic way, that the series just has this somber tone to it that is perfect. It nails legacy characters. It does everything perfectly, in my opinion. And I understand that Price of Spring may be too bittersweet for some people, or too tragic. I just think that's what the series deserved. I think it played it with the absolute, what's the word? Gravitas that it deserved. And yeah, perfect. Next is probably my favourite fantasy book of all time. And that's A Storm of Swords by George R. R. Martin, Book 3 in A Song of Ice and Fire. This has everything that you could possibly want in a fantasy book. There are things, when I reread this series last January, when I read Book 3, I was thinking that basically everything that I thought happened in Book 3, 4, and 5 all happened in Book 3. It is astonishing the amount of era-defining and truly seismic plot points he nails in this book. It has one of the best character progressions in fantasy through Jaime Lannister. I love Jaime Lannister. I think he's one of the best characters in fantasy, and he nails that in one fucking book. Is crazy. Then, yeah, if one of the things that happened in this book, be it Red Wedding, Purple Wedding, Moon Door, any of these things, if they'd have happened just one, this book would still be iconic. Instead, every single thing happens in this book. This chunky book is just filled with nothing but fantasy gold. And I truly... there's the reason that I don't think that Martin needs to deliver another book. I don't think he needs to finish The Song of Ice and Fire personally. He's done enough. He wrote one of the greatest pieces of fantasy writing that we've ever had, and I have nothing more to ask of him than that. Like, because I truly don't know whether the series can end in a way that is completely perfect. And so I'm like, you know what, bro? You already gave me perfect. I read book 1, 2, and 3 now as an arc and just end there, and I truly think they're still some of the greatest fantasy books ever written. You know what else is goated? Going Postal. Don't let anyone tell you different. Going Postal, I've read it twice. I love this book so much. This is a later Discworld entry. It was my first Discworld book because my brother owned The Colour of Magic and Going Postal from when he was a kid, and the Sky TV movies came out. But he hated Pratchett, whereas I just picked up Going Postal because my housemate told me that he loved the TV movie, and I read it, and my God, did I love it as well. Night Watch is also very close. Night Watch is also a fantastic book, but this is one that you can read as your first Discworld book, and it is my recommended starting point. It has chapters, so it's way more familiar to fantasy readers, and it kind of plays on the hero's journey story, and it just spoofs on it in such a perfect way, where you're essentially following Moise von Litvig, who is a fraud, who, when he is going to be hanged for his crimes, is then given the ultimatum of he can either be hanged or he can take over the post office and become Postmaster General. And you follow him essentially restoring the post office. So it's very British, it's very whimsical and funny, has a great cast of characters, morally grey character that you're like, man, you're an arsehole, but God, you're compelling. And I think this has some of the funniest jokes that Pratchett's ever written. I think it has some of the best characters that he's ever written. And I truly recommend Going Postal if you're interested in any way in Pratchett. If you read Going Postal and don't like it, Discworld isn't for you. And if you read Going Postal and love it, then you're in for a treat. Because this is to me, Discworld. This is Discworld concentrated. If you drank this, you would gag because you need water. I don't know whether Americans know what squash is in the UK, but that's what it is. Jade Legacy, Book 3 in the Greenbone Saga, the perfect legacy, funnily enough, series to me. Much like the Long Price Quartet, this definitely also follows that in you're following characters throughout their entire lives. You're experiencing their children. You're experiencing the change in their personalities. You're experiencing the change in their relationships, and it spans such a long period. Fonderly just nails interpersonal relationships. That is the key. The fantasy is urban fantasy. It has a martial arts element to the magic system. It's very centered in kind of gang culture. Gang culture is not something I particularly like. I don't particularly like reading stories or watching movies around it, be it like Goodfellas and that for American, be it anything for kind of like Japanese gang culture. None of that appeals to me particularly. So I was very surprised with how much I loved the Greenbone Saga. And that comes down to that I just had characters that I was invested in. The writing is very accessible and very clean, in the sense of like it gets across the information it needs, and you are kind of propelled through the plotting and the character work. There is a progression to the story in the sense of the technological advancement, the magical advancement. Things progress in this series that feel organic and earned, that really are delivered in this book. Critiques for this book are that it spans too much time in too short a period in the third book. Personally, I think because I knew that was coming, I had a different expectation, and as a result, it really worked for me. There are some shocking moments in this series. It does not pull any punches in terms of damaging or hurting your main characters. And yeah, fantastic. Ship of Magic is another book that just has to be mentioned in a video like this. This is one of my favourite books of all time. Robin Hobb is one of my favourite authors of all time. The thing I love about this book in particular is that I really enjoyed the Farseer trilogy, especially Royal Assassin, but it was a good trilogy. And what I was hit with in Ship of Magic was a massive, unbelievable step up in quality for me, or my enjoyment. We hit third person limited, we hit a multi-POV perspective. It just did everything that I love in fantasy. It's set in a different place that felt fresh, it felt nuanced, it felt realised. And you're following a family that owns a live ship. And essentially the idea of that is that every generation that wizard wood is this kind of magical wood that is made into these ships, and that if enough members of a family die and give their life into the ship, the live ship will become sentient. The figurehead at the front will gain sentiency, and it will go faster. It will do things that it will get itself out of lodges. It will do all kinds of things that regular ships can't. And so there are trader families, these families that can get to places that other people can't, etc. You're following a family where the patriarch has just died, and the wife of that person, the daughter of that person, the son-in-law of that person, they're all wrapped up. The grandson, they're all wrapped up in the plot, and you're following their perspectives as their relationship to the ship alters because of who is put in charge of the ship, what they want to do with it. Everyone is irrevocably, their lives are altered by the event of the patriarch dying, and they're not being. It's essentially the fact that a plan has not been set out and agreed to in advance, and so when the death happens, there is an infighting to the family. And yeah, I just thought this book was brilliant. I think that her writing is fantastic. She just melodically and very slowly explores everything, and just I love Robin Hobb's writing. I think it's some of the best in my opinion. It's very much going to come down to, do you like slow paced books? No, then don't read it. If you love slow paced books and you love a slow burn and you love character interpersonal relationships and you love nautical themed and you love themes around slavery, around sexism, misogyny, around interpersonal abuse, around generational abuse, especially. All of these things are explored in a really fantastic way. For this one, I'm just going to grab the first book that's available to me because I get to cheat with this one. The Lord of the Rings is one big book. That's how it was meant to be released, and that's the way I'm going to review it. Lord of the Rings, I'm not going to say too much about it. It's a fantasy goat. Yeah, it's there. We all know it. We all love it. Tom Bombadil is a legend. I won't have his name besmirched. And yeah, this is a defining book in a fantasy genre. I'm currently rereading it with me, Murphy, Bryce, and Grace for our kind of little book club. And we're doing it in the Discord as well, so if you want to get involved, it's there. We're going to be doing a kind of conversation around Fellowship at some point soon, hopefully. So yes, we're doing it once a quarter, so I plan on reading The Two Towers in like April or May, so you've got plenty of time to read it and catch up and everything. So that's that. And then finally, because I didn't want to just have one horror book to itself, so I'm just going to stick it in here, if Grace even owns it. I love The Shining. The Shining is my favourite Stephen King book. It's been a long time since I've read a Stephen King book, to be perfectly honest. But The Shining is fantastic. Following Jack Torrance and Danny Torrance as they go to the Overlook Hotel, and essentially this oppressive spirit is over this hotel as they're by themselves at this hotel. Jack is working as the kind of, while the place is shut down, he is the caretaker looking after the place, and his family's there with him. And yeah, this differs from the film quite massively in the sense of who Jack was before, who he is during the book, and the consequences of everything that happens. This is much more sympathetic to Jack in the sense of that it's more of a tragedy of him and what happens to him and what happens to his family. There is more of a play on the idea of the Overlook Hotel as this kind of manifest evil, whereas the film is much more Jack Nicholson gets there and he's kind of already crazy. The Shining is a great Halloween read. It's a very creepy book. That isn't scary, it's just unsettling. But like always, The Shining really nails the character work, and you're really invested in the slow moments of this family. And the big difference is that, in my opinion, The Shining has a great ending. That Stephen King does not often nail endings, let's just say that. Usually his books take quite a substantial knockdown because of their endings for me. Whereas The Shining, loved the ending. So that's my favourite. Well, I am back after quite a lengthy break, honestly, in time of filming this. The rain is starting to fall, and so I thought, what a better time to talk about books. After we've done the fantasy bit, we're now moving on to literary fiction. Maisie, you're making this very difficult. Well, we're going to start with... actually, I'm going to reorder this slightly. Because I was actually watching Murphy's video on hidden gems, and she spoke about Foster by Claire Keegan, which is definitely on the best books I've ever read list. This is a very, very short book, as you can tell, a novella, even a short story, some would dare say, that is about a little girl who is growing up in Ireland. Essentially, she has a lot of siblings, and her parents are struggling because her mother is pregnant again. And so when the child is planned to be born, is expected, she's kind of shipped off to stay with a foster family for a period of time to alleviate some of the pressures on them. And essentially, the story just follows her kind of discovering this new family, starting the relationship with them. And the thing that Claire Keegan does so well is that she kind of maneuvers through the pre-existing relationship and the new relationship without really spelling it out, in terms of like, without, should I say, kind of spells it out, but without telling us what the previous relationship was like. Instead, the comparison between what she has known and what she now knows could be a relationship shows the schism between what she was experiencing before. And it's a very emotional book. Claire Keegan, in as few words as possible, is able to create fully fleshed out characters and emotionally impacting decisions and plot points. She is a master of the short story, honestly. So if you're looking for someone who is in that realm, any of Claire Keegan, she has some collections. She has these ones which are a bit longer, but still less than 100 pages long. I think she is one of the best at that. Sticking with the Irish theme, in that comment section to Murphy's video, I made my recommendation for a hidden gem, which remains Panenka by Ro Hession. I absolutely adore this book. I remember seeing it when Jack Edwards reviewed it. It's published by Blue Moose Books, who absolutely adore them. For those who are unaware of what a panenka is, it's an important element of the book, obviously, with it being its name. A panenka is a term in football, as in soccer, where you are taking a penalty kick and you chip it down the middle, essentially embarrassing the goalkeeper. And we're following a character who, in this imagined town of Seneca, which kind of sets up the stoic nature of the characters we're following. We're following a guy who 25 years previously was in the final of like a very big local football game. He essentially has the ability to win the game, panenkas it, and misses. And now we're following a man at the age of 50 who 25 years previously did this, and essentially how that one decision has impacted the rest of his life. Like I said, there is stoicism rifled throughout this book, where he is a man just silently absorbing the damage that he has wrought unto himself or has been brought onto him because of his actions previously. It's a very quiet book. For me, it felt like I was reading about the people I grew up with. Family members, family friends. When I watched my family and realised things about them or made discoveries, it had the same feeling as Hession provides a depth of emotion that a lot of working class people do not have the luxury to express for themselves. And I thought this book did a remarkable job of showing the delicate, sensitive beauty in working class families, as well as the darkness, as well as all the things that are natural, but he just conveys them in a way that is full of empathy. And I feel that book is deserving of a reread soon, actually. Now that I've talked about it, I kind of want to reread it. Next up is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, surprising absolutely no one if you know who I am. I wrote my dissertation on Convenience Store Woman. I absolutely adore this book. Once again, another little short fella. Convenience Store Woman follows a mid-30s woman, Kiko. It's ironic that I said Sayaka Murata because essentially this book is... It's basically Sayaka Murata. At the time of writing this, she was a mid-30s woman working part-time in a convenience store. And essentially, Kiko is this character who is very happy with what she's doing. Her thought process, her understanding of the world is informed by the rigidity and the understanding that she has a role to perform inside of that convenience store, and she can express herself through that. Outside of that, she has no understanding of what society expects of her, what her family expect of her. And so throughout this book, essentially, she is confronted with the idea of what you're doing isn't normal, you should do this to be normal. And she does all of those things. And the result of that is the drama inside this book. The thing I love about Convenience Store Woman is that it is the story of a woman who is perfectly happy in her life. And the expectations of others make her unhappy. And I think that's a thing that a lot of people can relate to, a lot of people can understand. This is not some brilliantly nuanced piece of writing. What she is writing is very straightforward, just telling you how it is. And if you resonate with that, then you will resonate with it. If you bounce off it, you're going to bounce off it. I personally adore every bit about it. I find it a big cathartic read. Every time I reach that ending, the book builds up all of these emotions, all of these negative emotions, and then it just releases you from it. And it is the pure definition of catharsis in my mind, where it is the removal of those emotions. Next up, I don't actually have a physical copy here with me because our friend is currently reading it, which is Swimming in the Dark by Tomasz Jadrowski. A book I was not expecting to be on this list when I picked it up originally. But turned out to be my favourite book of 2024 and is on this list of my favourite books ever. The book is told from second person, so you are the character talking about something. So I think the character's name is Ludwig, but I always forget. And it's set in 1980 Poland, which is essentially, it is a coming-of-age queer story of this boy realising that he is in love with Janusz, who is someone who he is kind of on this summer camp trip with. And what begins as this kind of, this coming-of-age love story, queer love story, evolves into this geopolitical commentary on the idea of privilege, on dictatorship, on government control, media censorship. It's essentially set during the crumbling of the USSR. Janusz begins working for the party, as it were, and they are both working class kids. And he, our main character, Ludwig, has things happen in his life that he cannot get help for or do because he does not affiliate with the party. And Janusz, who begins working for the party, then has these things able to happen for him. And essentially it becomes this, there's a personal love between them that you then explore the schism that is a societal, political difference between people. And I think what the book does so masterfully is that it does not make you hate anyone. I read it and I could, as someone who grew up working class and watched people do this, you understand why someone would be in a position where they don't care about everyone else. If you grow up working class, there are a lot of working class people that if they can get out of it and they have to tread on everyone else's fingers and let them fall to do that, they will do it. And you can't really judge that necessarily because you don't understand how they've grown up. Do I personally disagree with that? Absolutely. I completely disagree with that. But that provides a level of understanding to the character that I think is essential to be completely invested in both sides of the story. But Jodorowsky is a beautiful writer, some really haunting imagery, haunting descriptions, really captures the era, really captures the feeling of the breadline of the cold, counterbalances that the kind of the oxymoron of cold and heat together, of passion compared to the coldness of society, etc. So big fan of Swimming in the Dark. On another tangent of someone who is an incredible writer is Fernanda Melchor with Hurricane Season. This is one that I do not recommend to anyone who is not ready to get into some shit. This is a Mexican author who, this is translated by Sophie Hughes. This is set in rural Mexico and explores this culture. Has experienced technological progress, but is still rooted in kind of mythological / spiritual elements. So essentially we're following a story where the local witch has died. And this book is told in pages and pages long sentences. Like a sentence can run for 3-4 pages. And it is this colloquial dialogue full of the most filthy language, talking about the most reprehensible crimes and disgusting things. It is rooted in misogyny. It's completely revolting, and I was completely riveted. This is a book that should not work, and only works because of the pure writing craft of the author. A book that has sentences that are full, like pages long, should not be a page turner. That's antithetical. But it kind of works the same way as, I think someone like Stephen King writes these sentences that he uses line breaks to create this rhythm. And you kind of have tension build and relax based on those paragraph breaks. This author does it in a different way, which is you get into the rhythm of the character's speech. And so little stumbles, little filler words, there becomes a rhythm of someone's cadence, and you kind of become mesmerized by it, or at least I did. And there are some long, detailed monologues of just degenerate filth that come out. And I just, it's a book that shouldn't work. And like I said, it is full of the worst things. You're going to read homophobia, racism, transphobia, paedophilia. It is completely chock-a-block with the most reprehensible things that humans can do to one another. And essentially it's just exploring how the local culture can cultivate that as a norm, which is fascinatingly horrifying. We go to James next, which I also read last year and rocketed up my favourites. I read it quite late on in 2024, and this is a retelling of Huckleberry Finn. I'm sure you're all aware of it. It was a very big book last year. And to those who always wonder, I always get asked, do I need to read Huckleberry Finn before? Because I asked it as well. No, you do not. The great thing that Percival Everett does is he essentially, because of the time it's being written and the content you know is inside of it, you can feel the edges of the original text. You can feel what happened, plot points, etc., and you can feel where he is adding a nuanced, different take in terms of exploring the idea of code switching, in terms of the idea of mixed heritage, of what happened to female slaves. All of these things are explored where, like I said, you can feel the edges, and you feel how what is a square narrative, he fleshes out to make a circle, if you get what I mean. Like, it's just those little extra bits around the edge that provide this beautiful nuance and can make it a round piece rather than jagged. This is one that I read and was like, oh, this will be taught in schools, be it secondary or like college level. I think that this is a book that will be taught. And finally, I do not have a physical copy. I'm waiting for the paperback to come out. But I have a whole video on We Do Not Part by Han Kang. I have read a lot of Han Kang's other work as well. I talk about that in the video, so I'm not really going to go into that one. If you want an in-depth thing on Han Kang and why you should read her, I think she's an incredibly important writer. She's a Nobel Prize winner now, and someone else that I wrote my dissertation on. Maisie is playing with a broken binding box, which is always fantastic when I'm trying to record. Then we move on to science fiction. Science fiction has 3 books. Maisie, come on, bro. The first is a series of short stories, Exhalation by Ted Chiang. Another masterpiece, in my opinion. I absolutely love Ted Chiang's writing. I think he is a master of the short story, same as Claire Keegan. And Exhalation, essentially, the thing that I think Ted Chiang is so good at is that he morphs his writing style and form to fit the story best. So there are some which are very colloquial, there are some that are very technological jargon filled, there are some that are essentially like almanacs, and he rifles through the different forms perfectly to best suit the content that he's writing. The other thing is that he uses these science fiction concepts to tell very individual stories, some that provide big emotional moments. And I reread this recently, and it in my opinion, The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate is still a fantastic, like the best short story in the collection. I love The Merchant and Alchemist's Gate. But there were certain ones that were so much better on reread than the first one for me, and ones that I loved the first time that moved down. So this is a constantly fluctuating piece of work. All fantastic, but shifts depending on what you want to get from it at the time. The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, specifically out of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I've read the first 3 so far, and Restaurant at the End of the Universe just is one of the funniest things I've read. I absolutely love Douglas Adams' absurdist writing. Specifically, I think that he writes the cleverest dumb jokes I've ever read. He has a way of writing scenes that are pure schlock, just pure stupidity, yet it's told in such a clever fashion that you can't help but there's a craft to writing silly jokes sometimes. That's something I really appreciate with Douglas Adams. We're following a cast of characters where I don't even want to explain it. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is just a classic that you should experience the way it's set up. The second book as well is just off the wall in terms of the first one is kind of setting up the series. It's an amazing book, and then the second one I think just goes further, and I loved everything about the second one. This is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal Omotar, a book that I absolutely adore. I've read that twice as well. It's a tough sell, honestly. I know a lot of people bounce off of it. In my opinion, so this is a love story between Red and Blue, two spies, agents on the opposite sides of a time war. One is a kind of dystopian robot type species, and the other is like a forest elf-esque species. And they're traveling throughout time to change the course of events to mean that their army is currently in the kind of beneficial place at the time of the present. The book is split into 2 parts, like each chapter is kind of split in 2. You read the kind of description of the time period they're in, the planet they're on, the way that they get to the letter, and then the next part is you experience the letter that the other person has left for them. And it's this kind of cat and mouse love story that goes on. But the thing that people bounce off the most is the writing, because the letters are extremely colloquial, completely standard everyday speech. And the other thing is that quite often the descriptions are quite abstract and complicated and all over the place, where the words themselves are beautiful and create this kind of very broad stroke painting, but people struggle to actually envisage what is happening. Now, I think the reason this book works so well for me as a result is that I do not visually read. It's beyond me. I read words, I have an idea of what they're trying to describe, and I appreciate the word choice and the feeling of it. I do not envisage. The people that have read this book that I have spoken to who are keen envisagers, someone who absolutely, they read like it's a movie. My old housemate was like that. I know a lot of people who are like that bounce off of the descriptions in this book because they are so abstract. So I think that's a completely personal thing. For me, I love the writing in this book. I think that they are fantastic writers, and the friction between the two writing styles completely work and flesh out the characters that we're having. Then we will go on to classics. Okay, beginning with the ones I don't own physically, 1984 from George Orwell. It's hardly surprising. I've read that book twice as well. Man, I've been rereading quite a bit. Good for me. 1984 is a cornerstone of dystopian fiction and science fiction. It tells the story of Winston Smith, who is living in this dystopian visage, and it's the originator of Big Brother, of groupthink, of Room 101, all of these iconic tropes, iconic imageries, iconic metaphors, iconic everything comes from 1984. It is a depressing piece that explores the concept of pure governmental control and the altering of society through an authoritarian government. These kind of governments existing, but I think for a lot of people living in the West, they are becoming more aware of the fact that they're living in one. And so, yes, valuable reading. And then the other is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. One of the most powerful books I've ever read. I did a presentation on it at university, and it follows a young girl called Pecola, who is growing up in, I think it's 1960s, in a predominantly, if not all, African-American neighborhood. And it just follows herself as a character who longs to have blue eyes. It's a kind of allegory for the idea of wanting to be white, the white beauty standards of having dolls that are fair-skinned and have bright blue eyes and blonde hair. And it's the idea that societally we create constructs of beauty, of wealth, of privilege and things that by order of setting a standard, you don't have to say that someone's not included with it. Because if they never see themselves inside of it, they know that they aren't it, if you get what I mean. So when you've got this idea of, look at this beautiful little girl, she's a white-skinned girl with bright blonde hair and blue eyes. Pecola, as a black girl with black hair and brown eyes, looks at it and is like, oh, then I am not beautiful inherently, if that is what society tells me is beauty. And the story just goes through following multiple characters across multiple decades, and a horrid thing happens at the end of this book that I would warn a lot of people to be prepared for. And the thing that the book does so well is that it provides context for characters and empathy for characters while never forgiving them. A character in this book does a completely irrevocably life-altering thing that is unforgivable. It is truly one of the most disgusting things that a human being can do. And before that happens, the book provides you with his backstory and context for him that is heartbreaking in of itself. And it's kind of this idea of, it basically just identifies the idea that outside of, if we're going to address individual crimes, then societally why these crimes are happening have to be investigated and curbed in of themselves, because it's never going to stop if society encourages the actions that take place in this book. There is the feeling of the panopticon, the idea that you're being watched, you're being surveilled, it's a lot to do with how white culture in America created this feeling of supremacy after the abolishment of slavery. Through the idea, like I was saying, beauty standards that are all white, the panopticon, the idea that the police don't need to be there if you always feel like you're being watched, and that's set up inherently in the culture. there is a lot of that explored that is masterfully done for someone's first book. And it's, I always say it is dumbfounding that The Bluest Eye is someone's first novel and one of the greatest books I've ever read. Then I'll just go through this list. The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami. I absolutely loved this book when I read it. It's been years now, but I read this at a very early point when I started reading again, and I was just struck by the writing style, how clean and precise the prose is, while describing these magical, realist, completely nutty scenarios and imageries, but tells it in such a clean way that for me, I found it extremely accessible. The one critique of Murakami that will always be there for me is that he has a horrid writing of women that is objectifying, and I just don't enjoy it. There's a lot of, I think this is one of those authors that it's going to be up to you. I've seen a lot of people talk about the idea, well, it represents the culture. If there is an inherent kind of misogyny that exists at the time of writing in Japanese culture, maybe he's just representing that. All kinds of arguments get bandied around, whether they're right or wrong. There's just so many opinions. My opinion personally is that I took what I got from it, which is, at the time I was moving to a new city. I was basically out of my comfort zone in terms of the situation I've been living in for the 4 or 5 years beforehand was gone. This was the first time living by myself as an adult without someone else there. It was a big moment of shift for me, and we are following a man who is experiencing alienation, and at the time it just resonated, this alienation, this feeling of aloneness, that I was emotionally just bombed by this book. So Wind-Up Bird Chronicle will not be for everyone, but I at the time absolutely adored it. And it's funny because I adored it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I loved reading it alongside the negative, but the negative of how he writes women has such a stigma in my mind that I haven't read him since, even though I own Kafka. I owned like 8 Murakami books after reading it, but never picked any of them up because of that kind of, do I want to do that to myself? So at the moment, Wind-Up Bird Chronicle is a one and done in terms of like an author that I just am mesmerised by their writing, but have not continued. We've got Of Mice and Men next by John Steinbeck. A short little book I read for school and then picked it up again a couple of years ago and reread it, that follows George and Lenny, 2 guys who are they travel to this kind of they travel to a farm to begin working. They're kind of one of a lot of people at the time who travelled around, went to different farms to work, to get a bit of money to go to the next place, and they were just kind of nomads. John Steinbeck, as he's writing these books, is actively travelling around and writing stories based on the people he's coming in contact with. I think Steinbeck is an extremely efficient writer. I think he writes very cleanly, very simply, but once again, he's one of those people that conveys a lot of meaning and emotion within very simple blue-collar writing. It's perfect for this because we're following blue-collar characters. If there was this beautiful writing, it could work, but I think what Steinbeck's doing is just writing the truth of what he's witnessed, and as a result, to best express these characters, he is writing them in a very straightforward manner. East of Eden I will be reading in April, which I'm really looking forward to. If you want to join the Discord to read that, it is our April Discord buddy read, so feel free to get involved. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen is a certified banger. I don't think I need to explain Pride and Prejudice, so instead I'll just say that if you're scared about reading a classic, especially an older one such as this, I know old is a relative term, but this is still old enough. Was it 1806? 1813. That's pretty fucking close. Then read Pride and Prejudice, because Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen is an excessively funny person, and I think that she provides a level of yeah, just comedic undertone that makes it very clear what she's trying to get at. I think comedy is one of the best ways of understanding an older text, where sometimes a joke can make it very clear the intention if you're not quite understanding what the author's saying verbally, if you get what I mean. Pride and Prejudice is fantastic. I love Persuasion as well. Persuasion's very close to being on here. And then I've read Northanger Abbey, which I also really enjoyed. And would enjoy more and reread now that I've read more Gothic books. Pride and Prejudice, I would do yourself a favour and read some Jane Austen. Fantastic. Stoner by John Williams is a fantastic book I read last year as well. It's following a character, Stoner, who's brought up in a kind of a very poor family. His parents own a farm, and so he is sent to school to go to agricultural college, where he'll learn everything to take over. But when he's there, he kind of realizes that he wants to do English literature. And so we kind of follow this guy who grows up poor, gets this opportunity and falls in love with literature, falls in love with the classics, and eventually becomes a teacher. And you're just following his life. And it's told in, once again, extremely accessible writing. These are not classics to be scared of. Specifically, the last three. Pride and Prejudice, Of Mice and Men, and Stoner are very accessible. And yeah, you essentially follow it's the saddest man's life you've ever seen. It's about the relationship he forms, his children, his life at his college that he works at, and all of the things that go on with that. It's a fantastic book that doesn't sound like it will be the best, but when you read it, you just get kind of caught up in John Williams's writing and Stoner as a character. He's a great character because he's someone you understand that if you read his life from someone else's perspective, he would be an antagonist. But because you're following him, you have a sympathy and a connection to him while still having that distance of understanding that someone else may view him as a piece of shit, and while he's viewing them as a piece of shit. And it kind of just, without saying it, explores the individual nature, the subjective nature of liking and disliking someone, of agreeing or disagreeing with someone. It all comes down to a personal subjective view. In a way, I suppose you could almost describe it as like a Kantian idea of morality, but who gives a fuck? Mrs. Dalloway, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm not going to talk about this book because I've been reading all of Virginia Woolf's works. I'm currently reading The Waves, which is the 9th book I've read, and so I will link the video of when I talk about Mrs. Dalloway, but I have 2 episodes up now of reading all of Virginia Woolf's works. So if you want to know more about my thoughts on Virginia Woolf and why I think she is a fantastic writer and Mrs. Dalloway is one of the defining pieces of literature of the 20th century and perfectly encapsulates that lost generation feeling of post-World War One, then my God, is that the book for you. And finally, for all the gothic girlies out there, myself included, Dracula. Love Dracula. Bram Stoker. It is an epistolary novel, which means I left time for you to write a comment. Epistolary is when it's written like a diary or a letter, but it's an epistolary novel that explores Dracula without him really being in the book. Essentially, the book opens with Jonathan Harker, who is travelling to Transylvania as a kind of junior lawyer to get the documents signed for Dracula to buy a house in England. That is truly, it's so funny when you put it that way because people have this visage of what it is. And really, like the book, the centerpiece of the book is that Dracula's trying to buy a house. And while he's there, he starts noticing that Dracula may be a little bit freaky, a little bit of a strange guy. Not noticing a reflection in the mirror. That's odd. Couldn't imagine what that would be. And the feeling is created, the mood, the tension is set so well as we follow Jonathan Harker as he travels to Transylvania, and the locals are making the signs of Christ at him. They are he can't understand them, but there's clearly they're all watching him and they all know where he's going and they're all nervous. And immediately creepy things are happening. There are wolves. The Count himself's doing crazy shit like running up walls, and it's very early on you get this wonderful essentially novella at the beginning of Jonathan Harker in the castle, and then the rest of the book is Mina Harker and then a collection of characters, a doctor, a family friend. You've also got Van Helsing as they attempt to find and stop Dracula. It's a dry book in the sense of it is written in the form of letters and diaries, entries and that kind of thing, but I think there's a weight of tension throughout this book, and Mina Harker is a fascinating character. There is always a sense of tragedy, a sense of need. You read it and you're like, Dracula needs to be stopped, and so you're kind of, there's a momentum to it. People complain there isn't enough Dracula in Dracula. I don't fucking understand that. He's the antagonist. The whole point is that you're trying to stop him, and he's a fucking vampire. If you found him during the fucking day, he's asleep, and you kill him. It's not exactly a fucking story. Instead, you're fighting a shadow. You're fighting an idea. It is this idea of evil coming on your shores and invading. This is a reverse imperialist story. One of the most fascinating things my lecturer said at university about Dracula was the idea that that at a point in Victorian society, as the empire has grown to this level, the idea of if the opportunity arose, they'd do the same to us. And so this fear of the East, where the rise of the empire is happening there, occurred where they thought, what if they got in? And so this book kind of manifests that. Dracula is this figure from the East, this shadow that has invaded the land and is trying to take over. And we're following characters trying to stop that happening. And so Dracula is a metaphor. Dracula, as always, with these kind of horrific monsters, they are an allegory. They are a metaphor to convey a societal fear, and Dracula does that perfectly. And he's a very compelling evil character, devious. And finally, we end on non-fiction, which only has 2 books in it, and one of them is practically fiction by the end. Nevertheless, the first one is In the Dream House, which is a memoir by Carmen Maria Machado. Love this book. This is essentially split into individual kind of vignettes that tells the story of Carmen as she experienced an abusive queer relationship, and she uses literary devices, literary techniques, tropes, archetypal characters, and uses those as framing devices to write vignettes that tell this story of the origins of her love for the partner, the rise of it being abusive, the realization, and the getting out. And it's this full image of that relationship told through these little vignettes that, like I said, hang on these framing devices of Dream House. So they're all kind of labeled as Dream House as, and it's Dream House as high fantasy, as doppelganger, as noir. What else is there? Bildungsroman, which is the story of. I'd have to break again, but he didn't answer. Go. Bildungsroman is a coming of age story essentially. Dream House is time traveler, stranger comes to town, inciting incident, point of view, all of these things, and it's another book that I think requires a reread now. And finally, When We Cease to Understand the World by Benjamin Labatut. I love this book. It's a series of short stories essentially that begin deeply rooted in history, and then kind of as the collection goes, becomes more rooted in fiction and creates this kind of thematic journey to kind of creating this point around the idea of genius and danger. At what point do people step over the line? In what points are unregulated scientific exploration and advancement compared with also the idea of creating an inherent good and how that can be corrupted by other people or other governments. All these kind of things are explored with really very literary writing. The writing here is not dry, to say the least. It is written like a fiction book. It is really engrossing. And so that's also one. And I think that's it. It's been quite the journey. Trust me, I'm exhausted. I imagine you are too. I hope you took breaks. But those are my favourite books I've read out of the first 500 books I've read. A great range, honestly. If you've got, like I said at the beginning of the video, if you've got any recommendations